Yeah, I was gonna say something about my mom's, man. My mama passed away on August 1st of this year, 2024. Passed away from her, lost her battle with leukemia, cancer, and dementia. Cancer having spread to her lungs. Mother was 85 years old. And when they told me that she was what they call transitioning, that she only had hours to 3 days to live, I had called up there. My wife was there, and my mother had been unresponsive for 2 days. My only thing in response, they was get out of her. She would stretch her legs out, and no facial movements and nothing, like eyes closed, etc. So I asked my wife to ask Akili to put the phone up to her ear and let me say my goodbye. And I said my goodbye to her, and I talked to her for about 10 minutes. She didn't open her eyes, but she raised her eyebrows. She heard me. That was an acknowledgement that she heard what I had to say, And I just told her, you can let go. We gonna be all right. And you lived a good life, lived a long life, and you can let go, And the following day she passed. And what's so crazy about that, I'm not a real religious person, I have my own homegrown spirituality or what have you. And the next day, I was out on the yard lifting weights, working out with my little workout crew, and a wave of emotions hit me. And I was like, damn. I just teared up out of nowhere thinking about it. But I'm like, damn, where they come from? And I told one of the guys I was working out with, I said, I bet you my mama just passed, And I'd be damned if I didn't go back into the building after rec. And the CO said, hey man, the unit manager want to see you upstairs. So I knew then. I go upstairs, she said, you got an emergency phone call. Called my wife, and she told me my mother passed. And it was exactly around the same time that I felt that wave of emotion. Rest in peace and rest in power to Leola Jones.
Why wasn't Shaka Shakur allowed to visit his dying mother or attend her funeral? Why is he still in domestic exile, having been sent to Virginia in 2018 without any due process, where this husband, father, grandfather, human rights advocate, and tremendous human being still remains hundreds of miles away from his family and his community?
The thesis of my life, do what is right now, never stop the fight, I'm never going back down. I can't expect I will see a high age unless we take power, I'm locked in a cage. The life that I chose, now it ain't a choice, responsibility that I have with this voice.
My name is Derek Ford, and I'm the Organizational Relations Director at the Indianapolis Liberation Center, as well as a professor at a local university, a small liberal arts college. And I am one of the co-coordinators of what is now the Shaka Shakur Freedom Campaign. And it was in the fall of 2023 when several organizations joined the new Liberation Center that we started, that I started communicating with Shaka, and we ended up starting what was then a group called Free Shaka Shakur. Corresponded through email and through phone, and talked a lot and got to know each other and developed a very genuine political relationship at first, and then a friendship, and then eventually kind of a mentorship. The Shaka Shakur Freedom Campaign is a 501c3. It's a national organization. So we have an Indiana chapter. Shaka is in Virginia. There's a Virginia chapter. There's also a West Coast chapter around the Bay Area. And there will likely be many more chapters. And it's about freeing Shaka, but also freeing all political prisoners of war, and really everybody, behind bars. There's so many incredible characteristics of Shaka as an individual, and also as to what he represents, because Shaka is not about freeing Shaka Shakur only. He's always thinking about other people.
Shaka and I met, I think it was in 96 or 97, to actually meet, because I was working with Northwest Indiana Coalition against maximum control prisons, and he was incarcerated at Indiana State Prison. And we were going in with Human Rights Watch, and they were doing the investigation about everything, and we were building up to that. So they hadn't moved him to Westville with the Westville 6 yet. So I got a chance to kind of meet him then. I was there, we were interviewing people, and I kind of saw him at the corner of my eye. And I was like, oh, okay. We got to interview people. He kept sending people away so he could finally get a chance to talk to me. And that's kind of like really when we really started corresponding with one another about the situations.
So I first met Shaka Shakur in the summer of 1992. I was just out of college, and I had moved to Chicago with some friends. And in a Southside grocery store, there was a flyer for a protest in Westville, Indiana. There was a Supermax, and there is a Supermax prison there, the Maximum Control Complex, the MCC. And there was a protest being organized outside of that prison in solidarity with prisoners engaged in a hunger strike against conditions of physical torture, psychological torture, sensory deprivation. And I went out to that protest, and it was organized by the Committee to End the Marion Lockdown. When I got out there in the fields of Indiana outside the Supermax, I found out by talking to fellow demonstrators who was a key organizer of the hunger strike on the inside, and that was Shaka Shakur. So at that point, I got his address. I wrote him. We started corresponding in a very in-depth correspondence for months. He really educated me.
I've been to multiple forums where we're speaking about the prison struggle, and, you know, Shaka comes up and he gives a speech from the phone telling new young people about the struggle, how to work, how to organize and be together in community. And that's really important that he's even has the willingness to, with all the struggles that he's been through, still organize and try to help people outside of his state, outside of his situation.
Shaka had a history already with the group. He was always sending out correspondence and stuff, and the things that he would be able to put in perspective for the people that were in the group took a lot of pressure off of me for having to explain. And they had, I can't think of his name right this moment, but the warden there, he hated me. Which is kind of hard to understand why, but he hated me. And he told Shaka that I was probably bad news, that he should stay clear of me. And so that, I guess that warning was really, he's not going to do anything. I got to find out why they feel this way. But yeah, I loved his locks. So that was amazing. And, but I think I fell in love with Shaka's mind, his intellect, because I'm a historian. And he is very well versed in history, and history and politics coincide together. So we had a lot in common in regards to the way we saw the world.
I ain't the most easiest man to love, and it ain't always been easy. It ain't always been easy for her. But good or bad, right or wrong, thick or thin, she's always had my back. She's always been there. I'm highly appreciative. I need somebody to lean on and whatnot, as well as vice versa. She's been there for a brother. And I'm highly appreciative, and I'm lucky. I'm fortunate. You don't always find. We have our disagreements and ideological differences, etc. But in the end, it's us against the world. It's always been that way.
The very interesting thing about my dear friend Shaka Shakur is that he's been involved in the juvenile system, going into his adult life, incarcerated, But he had reached a point where he began to understand the politics about finding yourself locked in that system and what is necessary and what you have to do within to turn that situation around and remove yourself from that equation. Not only did he learn it, but he started teaching it to other people.
You know, because our people, our parents, we struggling to try to survive and try to make it, you know, especially the men. You know, we don't have time for what they call the warm and fuzzy, you know, the mentoring and whatnot. Boy, I'm trying to make it. I'm trying to survive for you. I'm putting a roof over your head, clothes on your back, and so forth, you know, food on the table. And so sometimes we seek other places for that, you know. And for me, crime was a form of rebellion. For a lot of young black men, new African men coming to prison, a lot of us, we don't know our history. We're not taught. We're given watered down version of our reality in the schools. You know, a lot of us is alienated from the schools, school curriculums, and high school, et cetera. We lose interest in the school by the time we reach high school. I came in gang affiliated, street organization affiliated. I've always had leadership skills. I've always been able to motivate, galvanize other folks, you know, and dudes seeing something in me because I was a little wild. Well, I ain't gonna say a little wild, I was a lot of wild. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, and some of the old heads seeing something in me and was like, you know, brother, if you was to use that energy, you know, and that gives us skills or whatnot, you know, more towards the service of your people, you know, you would be a hell of an individual.
I met Shaka back in, I believe it was 1983. We were down at Westville. And as I began to evolve, you know, politically, I mean, I just began to see things that was hurtful. You know, after I finished Malcolm X's autobiography, I was in tears. I mean, literally in tears. Back to Penland, once I got my involvement, I look around maybe 3 days later, here comes Shaka on lockup from Westville. Now that's where we really got together, you know, because I broke it, gave it, look here, man, you read this. You know, and I was so proud of my involvement, I started ordering books like it was going out of style. And he's the only one that I would let highlight in my books. You know, because people highlight senseless stuff sometimes, but he would never highlight nothing senseless, you know. And he was just, man, like one of the very first people I met during my incarceration and involvement that I was mentoring to, because we were on the same lockup unit, MRU, the same one, you know, Brother Lomar was jumped on and Pillar 2 came to his aid. And we just every day, and he was young. I think he might have been about 18, you know, but he was hungry, and that was the difference to me.
Once I made that qualitative leap, man, and started studying, you know, different philosophies and theories and getting that history, you know, it made me commit to the struggle. You know, and it made me want to do something with my life. It made me want to be something other than criminal-minded. You know, it made me want to be somebody that was not victimizing people and just running around oppressing people, but being on the other side of history of somebody that was giving something back. You know, and also honoring the debts to my ancestors.
Shaka ended up doing 15 years in some of the hardest institutions in the country, and that politicized him. That he turned the prisons into a school of revolution. And as he's done that, just like how George Jackson did that in Soledad and San Quentin, the prison authorities punish people to the point of in Shaka's case, sending him to the supermax, to prolonging sentences. In George Jackson's case, of course, he never made it out alive. So there are folks like Shaka and George who are doing time because of their activism on the inside of the walls. And we clearly see that today with Shaka, like all the extra levels of punishment that he's, to the point of being transferred to Virginia, to the point of being beaten, to the point of having his mail tampered with, to, you know, these things flow from his politics.
In March 1972, around 8,000 people gathered in Gary, Indiana for the National Black Political Convention. It took place at Westside High School, the same school both Shaka and Akili attended. In many ways, it was a who's who of the various trends of the Black liberation movement. You had Bobby Seale, Betty Shabazz, and Muhammad Ali, alongside Jesse Jackson, Amiri Baraka, and Richard Gordon Hatcher, the mayor of Gary and one of the first Black mayors at the time. Although the goal of the convention was its slogan, unity without uniformity, afterwards, the distinction between revolutionary and reformist Black politics was clear. The lines were drawn between those who wanted a seat at the table of the existing status quo and those who wanted to overturn it.
After years of being in the New African Independence Movement and developed myself within the New African Independence Movement, I came to know of Shaka through one of our comrades, now an ancestor and a mentor of mine by the name of Shaka Shakur. Many people know him as Monster Cody. And I came across a lot of Shaka's work and, within their time during the Spirit and Shield era, and the work that they did with the Spirit and Shield Collective within the New African Independence Movement, as well as work that they have been collaborating on years behind the prison walls through individuals like Atiba Shani. And I got to meet Shaka a little bit years later, probably around 2016, 2017, when the New African Liberation Collective was being formed and things of that nature. And we formed a relationship through the New African Liberation Collective work.
Within several months of correspondence with Shaka, he then proposed that we start a newsletter by prisoners so that there was a very advanced revolutionary New African prisoner movement in Indiana at the time. People who had been very politicized. They were studying George Jackson. They were studying the Black Panthers, Malcolm X. They were studying liberation struggles elsewhere in the world. And Shaka was part of that. He was organizing study groups. They were organizing and struggling for basic rights on the inside and connecting with movements on the outside. Consequently, the Indiana prison system was separating out these cadre from each other, and some of them were isolated in the supermax like Shaka. And so Shaka's idea was we get a PO box. The prisoners write me. I format with a small team of people I could recruit, which I did. We format the writings, create a newsletter, and then mail it into prisoners throughout Indiana so that they can communicate with each other, keep developing their movement, and also it would be a tool to educate people on the outside about the revolutionary prisoners movement in the early 90s. And so this was called Human Rights Held Hostage, and it took off. Before time, it spread to hundreds of prisoners throughout Indiana and across the U.S.
The Republic of New Africa is a name given to the Black nation in America by 500 nationalist leaders at the Black Government Conference held in Detroit, Michigan, and convened by the Malcolm X Society on March 29th through 31st, 1968. The RNA consists of a population of millions of ideas.
We want the world to understand that there's a nation of peoples within the Empire of the United States of America who's struggling to destroy the heart of the beast when it comes to our oppression, our status in the world, and also trying to free the land and get to our ultimate goal as well, is where the Palestinians is trying to get to today, which is nationhood, statehood, and the freedom of our people and the freedom of all oppressed nations of peoples and ethnic groups across the world.
But just for the record, like we talk about colonialism, the way I can break that down for you in layman term where you can understand. Let's say you were a nation and I'm a nation. Or even better, let's say you got a community and I got a community. You understand? And let's say I got an organized force from my community. And we come into your community. And we take over your community. We take over the economics of your community. We occupy your community. You understand? We say, for example, in your community, you got resources. Then you got gardens and other things of value. And we take control of that. We seize that for the benefit of my community. And we give you a few crumbs of it. You understand? And then we have an enforcement force. We come up with all kind of laws and rules and whatnot that's in our best interest, but not necessarily your best interest. But we got the guns and force to enforce those rules and those laws. Okay? Let's say I set up institutions and so-called schools and whatnot in your community to now teach you how to bow down and accept those rules and make you look at those rules as being legitimate. And over a period of time and generations, you understand, because this all you've been taught and this all you know, even you start saying that those laws and rules are legitimate. And you voluntarily now hand over those resources that you have in your community to my community that's not in your best interest. And we'll fight on my side against your own interests. You know what I'm saying? Now I'm going to give you a name. You're no longer whatever your name was or your nationality was. I'm going to name you after me and my nationality. And now I'm going to give you a flag to worship and bow down to. Matter of fact, I want you to say you pledge allegiance to that flag. You understand? So now your kids and your babies, when they go to my schools that I done created with my curriculum that I'm teaching you, you gonna say you pledge allegiance to my flag, and you gonna learn what I want you to learn and what I teach you. You understand? So that's the basic cornerstone of colonialism.
Because of the unique character of our oppression, of our historical development, we have a profound need for a national identity.
Every people has a rhythm of its own. You know, the rhythm may be disrupted, but it never stops. You know what I'm saying? Every people has its own beat. You know what I'm saying? Culturally, you know, language, you know, social interaction, so forth and so on. New African people are no different. You know, even though Africa was raided and we were captured, our ancestors captured, and we fought back, we resisted, just like all other people. We had our traitors and those that collaborated, so forth and so on. But that within itself was the origin of, in the beginning, the genesis of the creation of the New African nation. Okay? Because through that process, you had many from different nations, different tribes, different languages, different religions, or what have you, right? But if you remember, it was a scene in Roots when they was on that boat down in the belly of the boat, and they was all chained and shackled together in the belly of the boat, and they started hollering out their tribal identities. You know what I'm saying? In what languages they spoke, and they started organizing. And they were like, I speak this, I speak that. I'm from the tribal, you know, boo boo boo. You know, I'm from an Ibu, I'm Ashanti, you know, I'm this. And that was them organizing right there. You know what I'm saying? That was that genesis, that many forming into one. You know what I'm saying? Taking shape, you know. And it is through that whole process that continued on as we entered into the Western Hemisphere, onto the islands and onto the slave plantations and whatnot. You know, you had a whole new identity forming and taking shape through that common oppression. You know what I'm saying? Giving rise to a religion, giving rise to a way of speaking, giving rise to language, ultimately giving rise to blues and jazz and gospel and spirituals and so forth. You understand? The way we dance, the way we move, the way we interact, the way we make love and everything else. You know what I'm saying? That was unique to our people. You know, that was shaped and formed by the social conditions and the social reality and our response to that social condition and social reality that we was dealing with within the Western Hemisphere, okay? So although we're separate from the continent of Africa, we're no less African than anybody that's in Nigeria, that formulated into Nigeria, Ghana, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, etc. We just as a people and as a nation formed over here in America. You know what I'm saying? That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is contrary to the statement by Kanye West about slavery being a choice, and giving the impression that there was no resistance, we've always resisted. You understand? We've always organized. We've always fought for independence and separation in land. Whether it was in the form of the Maroons, moving to fight and retreat into the mountains and the hills, whether it was in the form of Nat Turner, with his military strikes and so forth, So with that being said, that resistance has never stopped. That desire to be free and self-governing and independent has never stopped.
Queen Mother Moore was actually the individual who came up with that identity, New African, because when she went to Africa, when she went to Ghana, she was given this royal title by the Ghanaians as you're a Queen Mother. So when she got this title, Queen Mother, and when she came back to the United States of America and got with the Obadeli brothers, they was brainstorming on what should we call ourselves and things of that nature. So she just was like, hold on. So that took a whole lot of study of our social development here in the empire, all the way from slavery all the way up until 1968. So as they studied that period of time in those generations, and things of that nature, they seen it as, okay, we are a people that descend from Africans, but when we got on this landmass and we also going through this terroristic system called slavery, on the plantations, we started to develop socially amongst ourselves into a new people.
Revolutionary greetings. My name is Brother Maurice, member of the Virginia Shaka Shakur Freedom Campaign and also member of the New African Freedom Campaign. I'm going to read to you all the New African Creed. Number 1, I believe in the spirituality, humanity, and genius of Black people and in our new pursuit of these values. Number 2, I believe in the family and community and in the community as a family, and I will work to make this concept live. Number 3, I believe in the community as more important than the individual.
When he got out, he was very active in his community, helping people at every turn, especially the youth. That was his focus. And he had a son at the time.
Father Shaka was very interactive. He was extremely excited about spending time on the streets with his son because he was forever writing him. Back then you didn't have where you could do FaceTime or anything like that. So he was writing him and he would call and he would always try and find ways to make sure that if he needed anything, and even his siblings, that though they weren't his biological kids, they were his kids. And so whatever holidays come around, he would find a way to send special gifts and to make sure that J-La's mom had, things that not only for him and J-La's his son, for all the kids that were in the family. And so his relationship with J-La was really growing.
His son was involved in his son was murdered. His son had his life taken and in just a senseless killing. And it really impacted Shaka in a very, very, as it would any parent who loves their child, in a very hard way. Extreme depression, extreme guilt, extreme anxiety that he was trying to overcome because he was spending so much time helping the youth, including his son, but to lose your own son while you're helping so many young people, it really impacted him in a negative way, as it would anyone.
J-La was killed, leaving someone's house, and he was shot in the back. And he died on the scene. And when that happened, it really tore Shaka apart. Mentally, physically, he was just a wreck.
And then the fact that, like, a lot of people don't know me, that he had called me about 15 minutes or so before he was murdered.
Well, by the time he got the next phone call, they were telling him that J-La had been shot.
There's no ambulance, there's nothing. There's police, and his son is laying there in the street.
And once he was out, still undergoing the scrutiny and the harassment of the local authorities who were looking at every turn to get him locked up again. And everything he had worked so hard to build, because of his emotional state, it tumbled down. He got himself into a situation against those police who were harassing him constantly. And during the course of that altercation with them, he did not deprive anyone of life, but just for that altercation with the authorities, they arrested him and they gave him an ungodly amount of time. And he's been there ever since, you know, he's been there ever since.
Times preponderance, it would have been something like 20 years and then you add 40 on to that. He did that, but when he got through adding on what comes up under the 3 strikes, then he ended up with the time that he's got.
Yeah, the interstate compact, officially it's called the Interstate Corrections Compact. And what it is an agreement between states where they enter into a contract to send and receive or swap prisoners from their particular state. And I was sent out of state in December 2018 to the state of the Commonwealth of Virginia. I wasn't allowed a hearing. I was just asked to sign a classification paper form on the way out the door, which I refused to sign. And until we kept pressing about it, after 3 years, I was allowed to file a classification appeal challenging the decision, which was really just perfunctory. There's no real review. There's no real evaluation. And you just receive a notice in the mail saying appeal denied. You were appropriately placed.
State of Indiana deemed him a threat because he educated prisoners. And for that, they sent him to Virginia.
December 2018, Shaka was in Indiana prison and he was basically kidnapped.
This is not a Fed case. This is a state case. They sent him to Virginia to do Indiana time. That's how much he was educating and, as they say, radicalizing the inmate population.
That, to me, is just, it goes to show you how barbaric the U.S. quote-unquote criminal justice system is. And really, in one of the pieces, he talks about, the Fugitive Slave Act, really. I mean, the fact that they can just transfer you without any due process and for no reason. Right? At least no legitimate reason, because the real reason they transferred him is because he was organizing.
Yeah, it's far better to remain principled and true to one's convictions, even if it means standing alone, than to sell out even an inch to join the chorus of what's popular. The future will indeed show us to have been correct and on the right side of history. Yeah, history will absolve us, the world will be free. Challenges and setbacks will finally cease. Strength of our vision, clarity is key. Organize for change, sacrifice what we need. History will absolve us, the world will be free. Challenges and setbacks will finally cease. Strength of our vision, clarity is key. Organize for change, sacrifice what we need. Vilify me, criticize me, throw me to the ground. Brutalize me, crucify me, hate my very sound. I seldom give a shit because I'm marching to the beat of the maybe decades off final people's victory. My mind is more than focused, my ideology is firm and can't be penetrated by our enemies. Their way of life must suffer a painful morbid death. I'm all for violence on behalf of the oppressed. You wanna judge actions of the wretched of the earth? Your privilege and your chauvinism has no further worth. The right of revolution is front and center now. The people are not cowardly, that spirit's not allowed. Historically we're hip to our mission and our purpose. Modern slaving system beyond being worthless. Rage of the masses is inwardly focused. Once we turn it outward, we're no longer hopeless. History will absolve us, the world will be free. Challenges and setbacks will finally cease. Strength of our vision, clarity is key. Organize for change, sacrifice what we need. History will absolve us, the world.
In terms of, as an individual, I think that it's unintelligible. I can't make sense of how somebody who has undergone so much horrific treatment and horrific injustice maintains a sense of revolutionary optimism and hasn't given up and continues to fight and continues to be humble also. I think that those are distinct qualities that I look up to in him for sure.
They moved him 1,000 miles away from home. He's not able to see his wife. He's not able to be around and build with the people who actually love and care for him. And it becomes a very strenuous and stressful situation. But nevertheless, he pushes forward. Nevertheless, he's full of encouragement. He's full of hope. And he's full of determination. It's just, for me personally, it's just a lot to be learned from that man who was able to endure so much, but still come out of it with your head high and push it forward. And that's why we fight like hell to get him back home to the people that love him the most.
Being out here, out of state, out here in exile in Virginia, away from my family and what I have left, it's hard, man. It's a struggle. Being under constant attack, repression, it's hard to maintain that balance and not throw your life away behind these walls, because that's the easy way, the easy route to take. It's easy to come out this cell and just go crazy, and what have you. But it's hard. It's the hard struggle is being able to navigate this terrain, avoid them traps. Be scientific, be a critical thinker, outmaneuver, and be successful in what you're trying to do and what you're doing. And I'm behind these walls, but I ain't laid down. I'm not going to lay down. And for my mama, I'm going to continue to fight until you either carry me out of here or I walk up out of here.
Leaders, I refuse to be passive or liberal. I will militantly oppose the criminals. They on Wall Street and they in number 10. They run the world while the masses are suffering. Will it take sacrifice, something drastic? I know the struggle will bring plenty of caskets, but is it cool to have peace and enslavement where the most don't even have the basics? I say hell nah, and you know that's real, and so you can't blame me. I just
never be a slave. See, I would never be a slave. Never be a slave. Said I'll never be a slave. See, I would never be a slave. Never be a slave. Never be a slave. See, I would never be a slave. Never be a slave. Said I'll never be a slave. See, I would never be a slave. Never be a slave.
See, I am the reincarnation of Emmett Till. The slave master's whip is something that I'll never feel. Probably never sign a record deal, I can't be a pawn. See, this is more than just a track that I'm spinning.